What use is a theory of value if you can't use it to answer questions about what has value? In this video, I'm going to take the theory of value that I think is most accurate and use it to address a moral question. Is it permissible for a woman to abort a fetus? Spoiler alert, the answer is usually yes. So first question, what is this theory of value that I wish to apply? The theory says that all value that exists, and value does exist, value is real, but it exists as relationships between states of affairs and desires. Specifically, when something is good, then it is such as to fulfill the desires in question. I get this from the philosopher J.L. Mackie in the book Ethics, Inventing Right and Wrong. However, if you've studied some moral philosophy, this might confuse you. If you studied Mackie, you'll likely have learned that Mackie believes that objective value doesn't exist and all moral claims are false. So, what am I doing using Mackie to get true moral claims? To put it bluntly, I think that the traditional interpretation of Mackie misses the mark by a wide margin. I have other videos discussing that. Let's not worry here about what Mackie did or did not say. I say that for something to be good, it has to be such as to fulfill the desires in question. If you call something good and you're not relating it to some set of desires, then your claim is false. For the sake of symmetry, note that for something to be bad, it has to be such as to fulfill an aversion. Think of pain, for example. Most of us have an aversion to the sensations that would accompany a second-degree burn. Having those sensations is bad because it fulfills the aversion. But note, the absence of pain isn't good. It's neutral, of no value. And the absence of something one desires isn't bad. That, too, is neutral. Goodness and badness themselves depend on desires and aversions. The next thing to note is that there are different kinds of value, and one of the ways you can tell different kinds of value apart is in terms of the desires that are relevant. That's why the definition uses the phrase desires in question. Different types of value refer objects of evaluation to different sets of desires in question. When I say that a meal tastes good, I'm referring to what I like in terms of taste. When I say that a meal is good for me, I'm talking about the food's contribution to fulfilling future desires by keeping me alive and healthy. So then, what are the desires in question when we talk about moral value? Here it is. The desires in question are those desires and aversions that people generally have reasons to cause everybody to have. For example, people generally have reasons to cause everybody to have an aversion to driving while drunk. Drunk driving is wrong. People generally have a lot of reasons to cause everybody to have aversions to taking property without consent, breaking promises, engaging in deceptive manipulation or rape or murder. And all of these things are wrong. Now, is it wrong for a woman to seek an abortion? Are there reasons to cause everybody to have an aversion to aborting a fetus? This is what will give us the answer to the moral question. Now back to the spoiler. Usually, almost always, the answer is no. There are few reasons to give everybody an aversion to aborting a fetus, so aborting a fetus is not wrong. So now I want to explain the answer that aborting a fetus is not wrong. To answer that question, we have to ask whether there are reasons to give everybody an aversion to having an abortion. Just like there are reasons to give everybody an aversion to driving while drunk, to breaking promises, to murdering their neighbor, no matter how obnoxious their neighbor happens to be. Somebody might object. There are certainly reasons to give everybody a reason not to murder innocent children. An abortion involves murdering innocent children. Therefore, even on the system I defend, abortion would turn out to be wrong. But is it the case that killing a fetus is like killing a child? The fetus, at least an insufficiently developed fetus, has no desires. Consequently, the fetus has no reason to cause others to have a reason not to kill it. It has no reason to do anything. One has to have desires and aversions to have reasons to do anything, and an insufficiently developed fetus has no desires or aversions. What about the future desires of the person that would come into existence? Well, if the fetus is aborted, then those future desires will never exist. And a desire that never exists can't be thwarted. Not only is it not the case that the fetus has no reason to oppose the abortion, the aborted fetus will never acquire a reason to do so. One might then argue that this is cheating in some way. The future desires that could have come into existence are still morally relevant. It's wrong to prevent them from coming into existence. But somebody who wants to pursue this line of reasoning is going to have a problem. If this were sound reasoning, then not only would it be wrong to have an abortion, it would be wrong to refuse to or to interfere with conception. It would be wrong for a fertile woman to say no to sex, because saying no also prevents the existence of those future desires. To require women to conceive is an absurdity. So to say that women are obligated to bring into existence future desires is an absurdity. Actually, the fault with the argument is that it assumes that a state in which somebody has a fulfilled desire has intrinsic value. But intrinsic value doesn't exist. The only type of value that exists are relationships between states of affairs and desires. What I'm trying to make clear here is the idea that value is a relational property, not an intrinsic property. For a person who has a desire to eat a slice of chocolate cake, eating a slice of chocolate cake has value to that person. There's a relationship that exists between the person eating the chocolate cake and that person's desires. But the state of affairs in which a person wants to and is eating a chocolate cake has no value unless there's another desire out there, such as a desire that there be somebody enjoying a chocolate cake. It has no intrinsic desire-independent value. It only has relational desire-dependent value. So the fetus has no desire-dependent reason to create an aversion to aborting fetuses. The fetus has no desires, so cannot have a desire-dependent reason. The mother has no reason to create in everybody an aversion to aborting fetuses either. We're assuming here that we're talking about women who want an abortion. We're not going to force abortions on the unwilling. So who is it then who's insisting that these women have an aversion to aborting a fetus? What desires are thwarted when a woman who wants an abortion has an abortion? Well, it's the desires of those who want the child to be born. Those who want the child to be born have reasons to create in people an aversion to aborting a fetus. However, what we have here is a situation in which a number of strangers who want a child to be born commandeer a woman's body without her consent, against her will, so that they can fulfill their own desires that the child be born. Now, it's false that people generally have reasons to promote in people an aversion to aborting a fetus, like people generally have reasons to promote in people an aversion to driving while drunk. But it's true that people generally have reasons to promote in people an aversion to commandeering somebody else's body without their consent to fulfill one's own desires. And since prohibiting abortions involves commandeering somebody else's body without their consent to fulfill one's own desire that a child be born, this would make prohibiting abortion an immoral act, something in the same category as rape or stealing an organ. Was it wrong for a woman to seek an abortion? No. It is not true that people generally have reasons to promote universally an aversion to having an abortion. Is it wrong to prohibit abortions? Yes. People generally have reasons to promote universally an aversion to commandeering another person's body without their consent for the purpose of fulfilling one's own desires, including a desire that a child be born. A critic of this position will certainly have objections. Some of those objections will concern the metaphysics of value on which these conclusions are built. Some will insist that intrinsic value does exist. Some will insist that God, not desires, give things value. It's not my job here to defend a particular theory of value. That's done in other videos. My objective here has been only to apply that theory to the question of abortion and see what comes of it. So there is potential room for misunderstandings that I want to consider. For example, since a fetus has no desires and thus can't be wronged, does this imply that one can do whatever one wants to the fetus? Is fetal alcohol syndrome not a violation of the rights of the fetus? Well, the theory does imply that experiments on a fetus that never acquires desires or aversions would be acceptable. This implies that stem cell research is morally permissible, so long as that research subject never acquires desires or aversions, so long as it remains just a clump of cells. However, for something like fetal alcohol syndrome, actions that result in the creation of a person with desires that are being thwarted, but otherwise would not have been thwarted, has wronged the resulting person. I also fear that some people watching this might interpret it to say that a person's own desires determine what it is right or wrong for that person to do. Actually, you can't get that conclusion from anything I've said. The theory that I've used here generates moral facts that are independent of any person's beliefs or values, or even the beliefs of a whole culture. I have argued that a prohibition on abortion is wrong because commandeering another person's body for the fulfillment of one's own desires, that a child be born in this case, is wrong. And commandeering another person's body for the fulfillment of one's desires is wrong because people generally have reasons to encourage everybody in the culture to find such behavior morally disgusting. I have not said that its wrongness depends on the individual having a feeling of wrongness, a belief that it's wrong, or any other type of personal subjective state. Homosexual relationships were always morally permissible, regardless of what any culture said about it, because people generally never had actual real-world reasons to promote universally an aversion to engaging in homosexual relationships. On the other hand, people generally do have a lot of reasons to promote universally an aversion to interfering with people harmlessly living their own lives the way they please. There is, of course, a huge stack of other potential objections to consider. However, I try to keep these videos relatively short. So I'll make you a deal. Leave any objection you may have in the comments, and I'll make a follow-up video in which I address them. In the meantime, you can use this as an example of how I would apply the theory of value that I endorse to answering moral questions.